Hi, everyone. This is Alan Jackson with the Footcandle Film Festival, and over here across the room from me, Chris Fry, also with the Footcandle Film Festival. And we're glad to have you here for one of our Friday question and answer sessions and discussions about one of the films of our festival. And it is going to be of the film Making Sweet Tea documentary that we had kind of as a recommended screening time this morning at 10 a.m. But of course, with it being a virtual festival, you can technically see the film anytime you want to. So if you're watching this Q&A and you haven't seen the film yet, I'm not sure if that's the right order to go in. Maybe you should go watch the film first and then come back because this Q&A is recorded. You'll be able to watch it on demand throughout the weekend as well. But for this discussion of the film, we're very honored to have three of the filmmakers involved with us today. And we're going to go ahead and give them an introduction up on the screen. Up in the top left corner, we have Nora Gross, who is one of the directors of the film. In the bottom, we have John Jackson, who is also a director, so the two of them serving as co-directors there. And then we have E. Patrick Johnson up in the top right corner, who was a producer and also, as you probably recognize, a main subject throughout the film as well. So we're very happy to have all three of them. Welcome, guys, and welcome to the Footcandle Film Festival, and thanks for being here with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We're excited to be here.
Yeah. So we want to talk just a little bit about the film, obviously. We do have an audience that's going to be posing some questions, and we'll kind of relay those to you in a moment. So, but just to start off, I guess the biggest thing I've got to ask about is just, we are a Hickory, North Carolina-based film festival, and obviously, Patrick, your roots, you grew up in Hickory. This is your home. You've still got family that lives here, and obviously, Hickory did play a role in the film as well. I'd love to hear a little bit about the connections, how Patrick got connected with the directors, and just kind of how the fruition of this project, and what it has to say about your connection and relationship to Hickory right now.
Yeah. So again, thanks for having us. Thanks for screening the film. This is probably our most meaningful screening that we were able to get into a festival in Hickory because, as you know, Hickory is a character in the film as much as anyone else. So the quick version of the story is I wrote a book called Sweet Tea, which is an oral history of Black gay men of the South. I adapted that to a stage play. John and I have been colleagues for 20 years now. He came to see the opening of the play in Chicago and was interested in doing a film version that sort of chronicled the adaptation from the book to a stage play. Then, of course, it became much more than that. And the Hickory story is really interesting because originally my story wasn't going to be in the film. That sort of evolved over time, and then Hickory became very important as you all see in the film. That's the very quick and dirty version of it.
No, understood. And I think I want to get into the history a little bit further on in a moment, but let me just kind of extend the story a little bit. So the connection there sounds like, John, Patrick, you guys were colleagues, worked together for a good while. So maybe from John, Nora, you can tell me a little bit about just kind of the genesis of thinking about it in terms of a documentary. How did that process evolve after working with Patrick, and where did you start to see that this would really need to be captured on film and told in this format?
So one of the things that actually brought me to the Academy and to my discipline, which is anthropology, is my love of film watching and film making. And so part of what we've been trying to do at Penn, we actually started versions of this at Duke when I was there at the Center for Documentary Studies, but really tried to kick into high gear when we got to Penn in 2006 to try to figure out a way to fold into our definition of scholarship, of academic knowledge production, and appreciation of all the different forms that knowledge can take, including and especially film, since that was my background. So we spent a lot of time teaching students how, and mostly PhD students, how to incorporate filmmaking, what we call multimodal scholarship, into their research. So not just as a way to translate that research to a wider audience, which is also fantastic, but specifically as a way of speaking to other scholars in other modes. And so as part of that process, one of the things I was struck by when I went to see E. Patrick the first time is that he had already begun to embody an example of just that kind of scholarship, right? So he did the ethnographic research, he did the work, turned it into a book, and then turned it into a stage play. And so for us, it would be so fantastic, one, to demonstrate to the students this is happening. And it's not only happening, but it's being done with virtuosity and being recognized by the Academy, and using that as a way to build momentum around the filmmaking stuff we were doing. So we felt like it really fit nicely into what was a larger curricular intervention about reimagining what scholarship is in the 21st century. And Nora was an integral part of that process. And really, once she came on board, made sure we got it done. Because I think Patrick and I were running around super busy, always meaning to do it and fits and starts getting things done. But sort of Nora finally was the piece we needed to make sure we saw this thing all the way to the finish line.
That's great. Nora, does that jive with your story? Does it?
Well, I very much appreciate that that version of the story. But just to give you all a sense of the timeline of that the sort of in earnest process of working on the film has been probably at least like 8 years, the last 6 of which I've been on board for. I joined as one of those PhD students that John just talked about, and at the end of my first year of doctoral study, and John was one of my professors and presented this opportunity, and it really is exciting, exciting in so many ways, and not happening at a lot of other places yet. We hope it will become more mainstream, but really seeing the way that different modalities like performance and then film can bring new audiences to academic scholarship, but also kind of extend what scholarship can do, but then also be something that goes beyond the academy.
That's great. I wanted to mention too that I think, we become so exposed to so many documentaries these days. I mean, it's really wonderful with all the access to documentaries we have now that I don't feel like we had in years past. But what I really appreciated with what you guys put together is it's a very specific documentary on a very specific subject that didn't try to go too broad. And it really honed in on very specific lives and very specific people that all fit into a certain clusters of our society. And even though there were similarities between the characters, there were so many differences as well. I think the messaging was wonderful in what it shared about shared experiences, but yet each person has their own individual unique value as well with that. I have to say, I'll just comment before we get to some, it was a little painful for me to watch, because I think it did also remind me of some of the things about even a town like ours at Hickory, where there is division and there is separation and there is the railroad track that, Patrick, you did such a great job of highlighting for us. And you're right, it is still very much an unfortunate dividing line that I know we make our best efforts to get past that, but it's still a real challenge. And thank you for kind of shining a spotlight a little bit more, even for us to realize that, a town the size of ours, we still have some ways to go in working on how we bridge that gap with people in our community. So thank you for that. Chris, are there some questions from the audience? We can go ahead and provide them.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm going to actually tack on a question of my own to this. So I'll start off saying they just want to know, are there plans for another production of the play? And then I want to tack on to that, would there be an interest in making a filmed version of the play? I mean, you have little pieces in the documentary, but a straight start to finish, like film production of the play. So I'll turn it over to you guys.
I'll leave that second question to John and Nora, because we had 80 hours of footage that's been narrowed down to 88 minutes. So we have enough footage for there to be a film version of the play, but I'll leave that question to them. In terms of the remounting of the play, however, no, not by me. The play has now been published by Northwestern University Press. So I imagine that, high schools, colleges may be doing productions of it now that the script is published, but I won't be doing. I toured the show for 10 years, so I think that's enough.
Okay, good.
For me.
Fair enough. That's great. Good.
He has other projects that we'd love to film. So I think we're going to figure out ways to get some of that done as well.
Perfect. That's Great.
Um,
Yep. What do we have next?
yeah, so one of the things that Alan and I were talking about prior to joining the discussion, we found particularly, moving was in that portion of the film where you perform, Patrick, the performances for the individuals. And then was that something when you guys, was that discussed early on as something like it was going to provide some of the framework, or was that a decision that was just kind of made somewhere in the process? How did that come about? Because that was a really powerful portion, of course, the final one specifically in Hickory that did a lot. But talk to me a little bit about that idea.
So I will say in my head, originally that was one of the things that I think Patrick and I were both most excited about. It's one thing to do these performances in the safety of the proscenium arch, right, with the state. But it's another thing to be bold enough and vulnerable enough, I think, to do it in the spaces that the men themselves occupy and to do it in front of them. And what we tried to do, of course, is incorporate some of the responses, even critiques the men have of their performances, which we thought were really good. But I think that was one of the elements we held on to early, because we thought this is something that couldn't be done, no matter how well E. Patrick performed on stage. There's nothing about that will relocate it to these spaces where the men are. And so that was, I think, one of the early pieces we wanted to make sure we highlighted. In my wildest dreams at first, I mean, I even imagined it would be all that, right? We would just do a filmed version of the entire play, just doing it in situ, right? In these spaces of worship, in the club, in people's homes. But I think the film evolved into something that has that powerful element, but puts it in the context of so many other important aspects of what makes Sweet Tea, the project, really powerful.
And I'll just add on to that, I think while we were sure that was something we wanted to include, and that was sort of built into each of the shoots that we planned and each of the men that we sort of negotiated them being in the film with, we went back and forth for years about whether to include the making of the play as part of the storyline. And we've often joked as a team that this film is like meta on top of meta on top of meta. And so deciding whether or not to show the process of Patrick meeting with the director and navigating the play, we included at first, and then we left out, and then we included again. And that was a sort of interesting development over the course of the production.
Okay, great. And I know John had to leave. We knew he had something else to go on. So please pass along our thanks to him when you talk to him next for joining us for a part of this as well. So you talked a little bit, I know Nora, you mentioned it, but I'd love to hear from both of you as well, kind of the amount of time involved in the process, in the project in general. I know it's just something where obviously it stemmed from the oral book and the play, but as far as when you started shooting, like, you got 80 hours or so of footage, how long did that whole process take? And then also getting the buy-in from the people you were profiling in the film, was that challenging, or did you find that to be a pretty open process with a lot of your subjects?
Well, it's interesting. I was hoping that Charles, who's in the film, who's there in Hickory, could have been a part of the talkback, but he couldn't participate. But Charles in particular was a journey for all of us, because Charles, during the first few years of when the book came out and when I was performing, never attended any of the performances or readings or any of that. And when we initially started filming, he didn't want to participate in the film. And then there was a complete 180. And not only did he want to participate, but he's the one that set up for us to film at the club around the corner from where you are now, where he used to perform. He set up having one of his clients come get her hair done so that we could film him doing hair. But that was probably a 2-year process of just convincing him to be a part of it. The other men were a lot more willing. They're kind of hams in a way, particularly people like Duncan and Freddie. But interestingly enough, the first place where we shot was at the Heralds. Both of whom were just very loving people, just a sweet, sweet couple. But that was the first. That was the first place that we shot in Washington D.C. At their home.
And I think that was in 2014, right? Is that right? The summer of 2014. Yeah. And a little bit of filming had been done, I think, the year before that, during the production of the play. That sort of table read conversation with Patrick.
Oh, so actually, the table read stuff happened in January of 2014 because the play happened in Durham in February of 2014. So actually, the Herald stuff would have been that summer of 2014. Okay. So it's been a long process.
Absolutely.
Basically 5 years in filming and editing, and we had a lot of different traumatic experiences in the filming. One being our first editor had a tragedy where they lost a parent and a sibling, and then my husband had to sign on as the editor, and then of course we lost so many people. My mother passed away, the Heralds passed away, Countess Vivian, and Nora lost her own mother. So all of us had these sort of life events that happened over the course of the filming of this documentary. So I think the end result is so meaningful for us because of that too. Mm-hmm. And the fact that we could memorialize a lot of these people in the credits.
Well, first off, I'm so sorry for all of your losses over the last several years. And it sounds like it's been a difficult time in that regard. But I do agree, Patrick, what you're saying about that memorializing, especially with the Countess Vivian, getting to just know that you got to hear some of that story, and that's the power of recording and video. Is it now lives on forever, which is great, and we wouldn't have had that otherwise if it wasn't for this film. So, thank you for doing those and profiling those stories. I did want to ask you too, what do you feel like was probably the most difficult aspect of exploring this film? Just both from subject matter, from working with the people you're profiling. I mean, was there anything you just found to be more difficult than maybe you expected going into this? Was this something that you learned a little bit more about the process, a little bit more about the subject as you went into it, and you found yourself facing more troubles? I know I lobbed you a very, very wide open question, but is there anything you found that was a little more difficult or just difficult for you personally to kind of work with in going into this film?
Yeah, I think, Nora will answer this question differently from me, but she's heard me say this over and over again. I was an unwilling subject for the film. I did not want the focus to be on me at all. And that was also the case for the play as well. But as things evolved, my story got folded in because everyone said that my story had to be a part of the play and the film because I'm a Black gay man from the South, and also there was something about my relationship with these men that was interesting. So for me, and this is what this is sort of one of the narrative arcs of the film. For me, the most difficult or the most challenging part was my own reckoning with Hickory. Coming back as an openly gay man, despite that moment in '96 when they're celebrating my day, I wasn't open about that. So having to deal with that and have it be on film, that was a lot for me. But I'm also very happy that I was forced to do that, because one of the things that I came to understand in that process is the magnitude of what I had asked of these men. So I asked them about the most intimate parts of their lives, their relationships with their families and all their troubles. But that's very different from having to answer those questions for yourself. And so me being forced to have that reckoning with my own background and with Hickory made me truly understand what I had asked of them. And so the stakes changed a little. Um, that's how I would answer that question, but Nora may have a different response.
Yeah, I would say from the other side of the camera, the most unexpectedly challenging part, and maybe I should have anticipated this more, but what I said before about the meta nature of the story we were telling and trying to figure out how to weave in all of these components in a way that was clear to the viewer, and also in a way that sort of struck a balance between the specificity of these stories and making sure that we were really doing justice to these men's stories and showing the range of experiences. There isn't one single Black gay man of the South story. So sort of showing that, but also I think we realized that we were telling stories that were very universal. The themes of loss, of romance, of friendship, so many other, were really, are not specific to that group. So I think finding that balance and personally as a white, straight woman, Jewish woman from the North, from New York City, there was a ton that I learned along the way. And I hopefully that, sort of contributed to being able to find this balance between the specific and the universal.
That's so great. Chris, did you have something for us?
No, hopefully my mic is on. Some people have come in the chat that they couldn't hear me, so hopefully my mic's on. I was going to say, Patrick, that to me, that's what makes this documentary so special, is the fact that you were willing to put your story in there, because the book had the gentleman you profiled, the play has the gentleman you profiled, but when you, like you're saying, you're kind of forced. I mean, I'm sure it was uncomfortable, but that's what separates the documentary. Because if you'd remained just like, oh yeah, I did this show and I did the book and it would have still been good, but something about that added dimension that makes the difference between a good documentary and a great documentary. So I'm glad that you did it.
Thank you. I still say my mother steals the show.
She's great in the film, and
yes.
We were so sorry to hear of her passing just last year, but she made such a great presence in the film, and it was wonderful getting to meet her for that little bit of time that we did. So it was great.
Yes.
Good. So what's next right now? I mean, you guys mentioned a little bit about you kind of, this project's kind of done. Yeah, I know Patrick, you're moving on to some other things. Is there anything that any of you are collaborating on right now, or is this, or are you guys all working on some different individual things now? This is the time where you can plug a little bit anything that you may be working on or planning in the future. We'd love to hear just future plans from both of you.
Nora has lots to announce.
All right.
Sure. I'm working on some new projects connected to my own academic research, which is about grief in the aftermath of neighborhood gun violence among youth in Philadelphia specifically, and also more generally. So I've been working on a couple short films with some young people in Philly about their experiences, and also with some mothers of gun violence victims. And then as far as this film, we're in the process now of seeking a distribution deal and working with a producer's rep to get that going. If anyone in the audience, has some connections for us, we will certainly accept that.
Yeah, we're trying to get Netflix, Hulu, all of the big ones to pay attention.
It's a perfect fit for any of those platforms, so I hope that comes about. And I know it's on a much smaller, not as grand scale, but when there's a opportunity for theaters to open back up in the future, we'd love to help host a screening of the film here in Hickory
we'd love
as well.
That.
Because I do think this is an important film for people in our own community to see, and to hear some stories of people right in our own neighborhood that more people need to be aware of and knowing and understanding. So we'd love to help host that whenever the theater situation returns for us in the future.
We'll definitely all come back, and maybe some of the men could join as well.
Yes.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
It really
That'd be
would.
incredible.
So, Chris, were there any other questions, Chris, we need to
No,
hop on?
I think
we got the
touched on
one from
everything.
the audience there. That's great. Well, listen, we just wanted to say thank you both for being a part of this film festival this year. We wanted to say thank you for joining us. Again, we would have loved to have you in person, and hopefully there will be an opportunity to do that in the future. But until that time, thank you for joining us virtually, and thank you for sharing the film with us. We really, really do appreciate it. It made a great addition to our festival, and we'll look forward to passing along any other feedback that you may get from the audience throughout the rest of the weekend.
I'll just make one final note. There have been a lot of comments just complimenting you guys on what an amazing film. They really like what you were saying. The chat is available in the version that will be saved the video. So when you guys go back and reference it, so you can see yourselves on screen, you'll be able to see the comments and stuff there. So there are a lot there. So definitely check that out. So.
Oh, great. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank
you very much. Nora Gross and E. Patrick Johnson with the film Making Sweet Tea, still available through our festival throughout the rest of the weekend. Thank you both for joining us, and we really appreciate your time. Take care and have a great rest of the day. And we're going to go ahead and sign off from the Footcandle Film Festival today. We have some other live Q&As coming up later today. So there are several more films on the schedule. We'll be holding live Q&As after each of those scheduled films. But again, you can still watch the films and these recorded Q&As at any time throughout the rest of the weekend. They will all be available until the end of Sunday. Don't forget to go back to the page where you actually bought or unlocked the ticket for Making Sweet Tea and give the film a rating. These ratings help determine our audience favorite awards that we have at the end of the weekend. We'll be announcing those Sunday evening at our 7 o'clock Sunday evening Eastern Time award ceremony. And we really hope many of you can join us. It's a free event, open to the public, all online. Chris and I will be wearing tuxes, it sounds like at this point. Is that the plan right now, Chris?
I think so, yeah.
So we're going to make it a real award show. So tune in Sunday night for that and to find out both the audience favorite awards, but also the juried awards for the films for